Hey everyone, Karnak here of Star Wars Armada Explained. I have another extra special interview here. Today I have with me Chris. He placed fifth in Worlds. Don't want to put you one slot lower than where you actually placed, fifth at Worlds. Thank you so much for joining me today. Could you please just introduce yourself and tell us about yourself?
Hi, so I'm Chris Fritz. I go by Truthiness on the forums. I'm one of the bloggers for Steel Command. Real life, I'm an Army captain stationed in Maryland. I've been in a few different places in the country playing Armada, but I got my start just after my second deployment when I moved to Arizona, right around just before Wave 2 hit, I think. And then mostly got my start on Vassal because there's no one where I was in Arizona because it was the middle of nowhere, Arizona. And I've been playing and blogging ever since.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate. I live in an area where no one else plays Star Wars Armada as well. I also play on Vassal, and I think that it's definitely a great program. I'll post some links and things. I'll also make sure that I'm posting your fleet list in the channel description. Also links to Steel Command, which for those of you who may be new to Star Wars Armada, an excellent source of information and updates about how to play and lots of other variety of things. Please go check it out. So, how did you actually start Star Wars Armada?
So I was deployed on, that was about so first off, let me back up. I was an old Warhammer Fantasy guy, and during my second deployment was when the whole end times thing went down. So I was looking for a new game during that deployment. X-Wing was getting hot at that point, and I was thinking about getting in, but they announced Armada early on in my deployment and said, no, I like ships better. So I was very much looking forward to getting into it when I got back from the deployment. I actually got my wife to play a couple games with me, and then as soon as I introduced upgrade cards, she tapped out. So that's pretty much why I started on Vassal. Armada was so new, and Fort Huachuca, Arizona is so isolated that it was you barely had any X-wingers, much less anybody else playing Armada. So it started up in Vassal, and my
And
very first game, and that was fun.
the rest is history from that point on. You've been playing for quite some time, way longer than I have. The fleet that you took to Worlds, how did you come about developing, or why did you decide to bring something like that to Worlds?
So I never play. I so I have a balance. I don't like to play what's best. I like to play what's good and fun. Don't get me wrong. I'm still kind of a guy who will tweak things all over the place to try and get it as competitive as possible. But at the end of the day, if I don't enjoy flying something, I'm just not going to. And especially if something's really popular and people are complaining about it, I have I have a tendency to have an inner contrarian that just wants to not have anything to do with something that's popular and powerful. I don't know what it is in my brain that ticks like that. So I used to be a big Yavaris B-Wing player back in Wave 2. That was my very first regional. I beat Biggs in Martinsburg, West Virginia, and I was flying the B-Wings. But Riken Aces just kind of became this big thing, and so I kind of moved away from that. So I just started toying around with some of the less powerful stuff, and at one point, I got into a Madine project, like just trying to make Madine work because, well, it just not been success. Nobody been really been successful with him yet. So started playing with that and found that CR90s with engine techs and Madine are a lot of stinking fun. So played that for a good while. I think Wave 6 regionals, I took something very close to what Alex played at Worlds this year. I think she dropped one of the CR90s in favor of some additional squadrons, but otherwise, same general principle. Just max maneuverability and stupid amounts of fun. When Raddus started coming out, I kind of realized that as fun as mating is with the CR90s and engine techs, it wasn't necessary because they were just sheer
Right.
fun all by themselves. And I've noticed I've had a hard time trying to adjust back to other lists and play other things because I just missed the utter total lunacy of going effectively speed 5, whipping a ship around 180 degrees in one turn. And they've got TRCs which make them effective at pretty much any range you can engage. So they're fantastic at persistence. And that just kind of naturally allied itself with a good Raddus drop. So getting further into that, then I just never really took to the MC75. I felt that the drop is just too inflexible. I think a lot of this was playing against Alex in one of our Carillion conflict campaigns. Is she was really good at positioning the squadrons to stop an optimal drop, and I just found that the MC75 drop was just too temperamental. And just really didn't suit my style.
You need to have perfect placement, I found, with the
Yeah,
MC75.
yeah, you do. So it can absolutely be a fantastic sledgehammer if you can get it down right. But I never took to it, mostly because it lacked that flexibility and reach. So the Liberty has also been long-standing one of my favorite Star Wars ships, and I had used him a little bit in my Maydeen attempts, just found that it was a giant liability because it goes down so much faster than you expect. But I found an opportunity to get it into that Raddus list. And heavy Ion Emplacements, I think, is a big upgrade for me. They just add that extra oomph, especially since the Liberty is usually the first thing I have shooting, and pairs really well with the TRCs on the CR90s.
And the
So
Liberty
the
you're
Liberty just kind
taking,
of
does it have
hits a
Mon
good
Caron?
chunk of shields off, and then the CR90s usually can finish. So, no, because I don't like to spend the points. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have it, but I found I get more impact with an intel officer for those points than Mon Caron, and I like to have first player. I don't like to bid heavy, but I do like to be around 10 to 13 points for a bid, so that I can grab that first player. And Mon Caron, just for 8 points, there's other things that have priority.
And did you find that you were able to then get first player in all of your games or most of your games?
I had first player in. I actually have to think about this. First game, I went up against a Thrawn 2 ship that had like a mid-20s bid, so I was second player. And then I had first player against Geek, first player against Comatose. I got first player against JJ, actually. So, yeah, I had first player in all my games except the first one. And I should caveat that with my last game against Sam was a coin toss. So we bid the exact same, and I end up winning that coin toss.
Yeah, I definitely know that there are some pretty insane bids amounts at Worlds, and I think you can agree bidding huge can work if you absolutely need it, but I don't feel like that is ultimately what is needed. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree. I agree. I can never bid in the mid-20s. I can barely stomach bidding into the high teens. My comfort level is around the tens, and maybe a little bit more than that. I and I'm also comfortable with second player. I like to have it, but I'm comfortable enough with my list. It has enough reach that if I get second player, I can usually do just fine.
Absolutely. And so for your list, how long did you? So you mentioned that you kind of that archetype you've developed over the course of your career, but when did you finally decide this is what I'm bringing? What this is what I'm bringing to Worlds?
Honestly, probably probably when I won with it at Nova. I changed out. If you look at my comparison of the list between my Nova Open win and when I took the Worlds, it's literally just an officer change. I have a slightly lower bid, and I took an intel officer because I realized the strat advisor on Liberty. I I did it after talking with JJ and kind of talking through some things, but I just found I didn't need it in most of my games, and the intel officer just gives me that extra little umph that was more helpful. Especially, I didn't use it a lot on day one at Worlds, but day two, man, it was huge.
Yeah, it's for those of you watching don't know, Intel Officer allows you if you to after you roll your initial attack pool, you can target a defense token if they use it, especially if it's a ship like a single brace. If they brace, that token's gone forever. If they don't brace, they take a fistful of die. So it really creates a dynamic of choice. And I really feel like that with your list, especially as you mentioned, you kind of have a lot of, it may be smaller damage, but that follow up smaller damage was really working to your benefit.
Yeah, and just even within the lib itself, the lib is almost always going to get 2 shots, and you're going to only be able to brace one of them, which is just huge, absolutely huge. So if the lib doesn't finish off its target on its own, that's where the CR90s come in, and yeah, having that brace gone is fantastic.
So one thing to move on to the final table at Worlds, and I think it's fantastic. You got top five, but the thing I want to touch on, and I think that what has really blown away the Armada community, I know when I saw it, was at the top two for Dennis and Nathan. There were no large ships, and both fleet types were just something we had never seen before. What are your thoughts on the top two?
I think it's great. I was kind of blown away by not having large ships. I think that's great, and I think it's really a reflection of the players. Um, we kind of obsess a lot about fleet archetypes and just how popular things are at Worlds, but Worlds Men is always so strange. There always seems to be a lot of similar lists that show up. Like I remember the just before the Riken Aces nerf, everyone showed up with Riken Aces, and oh my god, it was nothing but Riken Aces in the top cut, and it was just, uh I don't remember regional season being like that.
No, I
Because
think
this
that
year you did see a lot of 2 ships in regionals, but you saw a lot of copycats. Then kind of the inverse happened: is 2 ship really didn't get near. I mean, I think the top 2 ship was sixth.
yes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm definitely one of those that feel like you got to have a large ship, and it's really refreshing to see that you had 2 guys that didn't bring a large ship, and it was just those two are so good. I've seen Toker play a lot, and he is just so meticulous. I still will hate him forever for bringing that goddamn Gazanti swarm when he could, but um, I swear, if there's one guy who's responsible for the flotilla nerf alone, it was probably him. But I love him anyway because he's such a good player. He's such a nice guy. And then Nathan, God, Nathan's just. I think this guy has been top 4 at Worlds every single year there's been a Worlds. So that should just tell you the caliber of player he
Well,
is.
obviously, in one, two of them.
I think he's only won once, actually.
Is
He
it?
won last year.
I thought you won last year and the year before.
No, that was JJ the year before.
Oh, that. Yep, you're correct. Yep.
No, I'm sorry, that was Norm. That was Norm the year before. JJ was the year before that, and then John Ringing was the first champion.
Yes, but
Yeah, there's been actually I remember JJ talking about this at Worlds. He was only rooting against Nathan because he didn't want anybody to repeat.
and that's fair. Two-time champion. But as you mentioned, a lot of these players who have won world championships had placed very highly,
Yeah,
and
and Norm was right there again this year. He was
yes,
on
he
the top
was.
table in the final round against Nathan. So, and then Yick was, I think, just below me at table 4. He easily could have gone. I think he still ended up top 10. He
He was
easily
ninth.
could have.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that should just tell you. I mean, I really think this game's more about players than lists, and I love that about it. We've got tons of copycat lists out there, but it came down to the people. I don't think any of them were running the popular thing either, because Yick was running an MC, a giant fat MC80. Riken, Nathan's running Riken MSU. Norm didn't have Price at all, so that kind of he had ISD, and he technically had 2 ships and squadrons, but it wasn't that activation shenanigans that everybody else is doing with Price.
I agree.
Um,
All the top 10 lists were, I mean, yes, you kind of had the Thrawn two ship and some variants in there, but for the vast majority of those lists in the top 10, all completely different from each other, all so unique in their approach. Even if they were taking something that was considered, copycatish, it still had kind of their own spin on it. I'm
Yeah,
definitely very happy, as we've already talked about, to see that the top two lists were so diverse and so different and not large ships. Because as you mentioned, we as a community, especially in the Discord, we're all like, "All large ships is it? You can't bring anything else." And I love the fact that they took that whole concept of what we thought was the meta and threw it on its head. And it goes to show that even though we've been so long without a wave, how many variations of different fleet archetypes that we thought were this is the best, there can't be anything else, like 3 or 4 different shakeups by now?
yeah. Yeah, and that's actually kind of why I secretly really love that Broba and Sam kind of pioneered that two ship because it shook the hell out of the meta, and I really think that we're more all upset that it's doing something very different and we don't entirely know how to counter it. And I'm not gonna lie, I got a little frustrated at it too because that was one of Broba's first punching
Me too.
bags, and it was just like, what the hell do I do to this? And then when he kind of, as we were building into worlds, he kind of told me what some of his locals were doing to change things up, and that really helped me. The whole sideways deployment thing that I tried to show off in our video, that really saved my skin because I did it twice, and my very first game, I only had really in theory of how to counter two ship, and I I diverted from my own theory, and two, after I saw it in action, I knew how to refine it a little better, which helped me a lot against Sam later on when I had to do it again the final round, and I went from losing to two ship to winning against two ship. Admittedly, horrible bloodbath at 6-5, but hey, we weren't 6-5 MOB. We were 6-5 with all but one capital ship dead.
And one thing I do want to come back to is that the thing about the top 10 is that the vast majority are almost all squad heavy. And I know there's
Yeah.
been some comments about how some people feel like squad heavy is potentially dragging Armada's meta down and not creating, even though there's still list diversity, the common theme is still squad heavy. What are your thoughts about that?
I feel like I'm the absolute worst person to talk to about this because I am that oddball in the top 10 that brought absolutely none. And obviously, that means that I'm pretty comfortable fighting against max squads with having none of my own. But that said, there's an obvious pattern year after year. Every single world champion has been some kind of version of squad heavy. Wave one was an A-wing swarm with Garm of all things, but it was still max squadrons. That was at a time when we thought that squadrons were a liability, and it was all about the Gen Con special and Demolisher. And then JJ won with a Y-wing swarm, and then Norm won with Riken Aces, and then Nathan won with Riken Aces, and now here we are with Sloan, which is a different version of squad heavy, but they're all squad heavy. So I get the complaints. So yeah, I have a hard time. I kind of waffle back and forth between hey, I'm perfectly comfortable with this, and obviously I'm capable of winning, but it's safer. That's for sure. I think that's the main thing. Is squadrons are usually so much safer of a bet than just you really have to be utterly and totally reckless in your playstyle like me to have any prayer of going squadless.
Yeah, that's one thing that Dennis and I we had talked about was that squadrons compared, obviously a ship you're investing, 40, 50 points even into a small base most times. And when that ship is destroyed, it's gone. It's no longer contributing compared to squadrons. You may knock off a squadron or two and get maybe 30 points, but the squad ball can still be there and still can be decimating your ships. And I can definitely understand people's frustration if they kind of don't want to always see squads be dominating, which is why I'm so excited to see the new expansion, Rebellion in the Rim. Yes, it has new squadron cards, but it also has new ship titles and things coming out. And I'd like to think that FFG understands and recognizes that there are the squad heavy potentially may be doing a little bit as too well, and that they have plans. I think that they are going to introduce some more elements to kind of shake that up. Is that correct?
So I gotta toe the NDA line here a little bit, see what I can talk about. So I'll start with one. We haven't seen the SSD yet, and we know just about everything we need to know about it. But I can tell you with absolutely in no uncertain terms that Annihilator with Callus and quad laser turrets is absolutely horrific for squadrons. JJ and I had multiple games where I was the punching bag that tried to throw squadrons at that thing, and it's absolutely horrible. It's so I wanted that ship at World so bad for that very reason, and I'm really sad that we didn't get it. But Rebellion Rim, I think I can pair it a little bit. What Nathan said is that there's some stuff coming that I think will make medium squads more appealing, as long as some generics. I have a lot of things from that. There's a couple upgrades I'm really excited to try out, and try a medium wing of some kind, both for both factions. I think they're going to be able to do it in different ways. Um, and yeah, it's probably about as much as I can say. I think you'll be able to accomplish it in different ways. I think imps will be able to take one of the upgrades and use it better than Rebs, and I think Rebs are going to be able to create a medium-sized meat shield pretty well with one of the other ones.
So I know, as you mentioned, the Super Star Destroyer that's coming out now in quarter 3. I know it's had a lot of delays, but I mean, for any of my viewers watching, if once you see this thing in person, you can absolutely understand why there's been such a delay. This thing is massive. It has a ton of parts, and plus, there also people don't realize this pre-painting these models, especially something on that scale, takes so long. But when it's going to finally be here, come out, I absolutely agree with you. It's going to shake up the Squadron Heavy, because if you do bring Squadron Heavy against an SSD that's fitted to wipe out your squadrons, you're going to have to adjust your play style.
Yeah, and I got to call Fantasy Flight out on their stream. They just straight up lied to you, telling you this thing has weakness against squadrons. Yes, it does if you don't bring the basic tools, but Annihilator, Callus, and quad laser turrets are such a small investment, and it's like beating your head into a wall if you're using Yavaris Aces, for example. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
And of course, as FFG mentioned, I know they mentioned that they hope to have some additional ships out by the end of this year. And of course, we won't hold them to that, knowing their current standard of keeping promises. I know I would be excited if they did. But of course, we have new ships coming out, new ship titles especially, and again, the new squadron cards for rogues and villains. And I know that I'm very excited to see that. I know a lot of people are saying, "Oh, Armada is dead. The SSD is going to kill it," and I'm just so happy to just kind of like, like the Valen Rudor had that smug look on my face as I knew that, like I was right all along. Not that I was right, but the silent majority compared to the very vocal minority. I think we're all very happy that Armada has so much more product coming for it.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I was a tester for Wave 7. I can say I have. We don't really get an eye into FFG's production line, but I can say that I'm a bit more hopeful that I was very hopeful Wave 7 was going to make it before the end of the year. I was obviously very wrong, but I have more hope this time because of how things panned out with this coming wave. And
And
then
especially their
Clone Wars.
promise of
Oh, Clone
more
Wars.
open communication as well.
Yeah, they've been. Man, I had some great talks with Brooks at Worlds. He was really cool to talk to. He kind of walked around, talked to a lot of people. He has been so fantastic to work with as a
Absolutely.
playtester. And it's really not to try and throw anybody else under the bus, but Brooks used to be a playtester before he started working for FFG in any capacity, and he kind of just understands how nice it is to have the positive feedback that he takes his time to go through every single playtest thread, and I hope I don't get in trouble for that, but he takes the time to go through every single playtest thread and say, at the very least, thank you for your test. And that sounds like a stupidly small thing, but it's such a
It
huge,
goes a
great
long way.
change from a playtester's perspective to know that, yes, your feedback absolutely matters, every single one of you.
I absolutely agree. It does go a long way, and it's nice to be heard. That's the important part, is knowing that you're being heard and then being responded to and not just receiving silence. So now that I know we've been at this for a little time already. I know that you have other obligations. Is there anything else that you want to bring up or talk about or feel like that should be mentioned in regards to Star Wars Armada?
I'm just super stoked for Clone Wars, man. That's something that took, I think, everybody. I mean, I don't want to say it took us all by surprise, but it was so great to hear. Just that we're we're getting a ton more ships, we're getting a ton more everything, get more factions. Just I really hoped that this would be a great year for Star Wars Armada, and it's going to start a little later than I had hoped, but this is. I really look forward to having Clone Wars here. I think it'll be a lot of fun,
I
and there's a
think
lot
Clone
of
Wars will bring a lot of people in.
yeah, and there's some mechanics that are introduced in Rebellion of the Rim and Wave 8 that they can fully implement into Clone Wars that I really hope they do, and will be really cool to see some factions basically built from the ground up now that we know, that we've learned some lessons and we can make the calls.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and taking time out of your life to do this interview. I know that people watching this will definitely appreciate it, especially the new players. It's so hard to start Armada and grasp some of these concepts, and just hearing players talk about it, especially in a casual nature like what you've been doing, I think it just really helps the player base to improve overall. So thank you very much for joining me. Do you have a final shout out that you want to do?
Nope, man, thanks for the interview.
Great. Again, appreciate it. Thank you so much. For those of you watching, again, I'll make sure I'm posting links to Steel Command and to his fleet list that he took to Worlds. And like always, I'll catch you guys later.